to work. I have a half day today in the office, but I wanted to come on here and talk to all of you about something I've been thinking a lot about. I know much of you have been thinking about this as well. Hello, Danielle. Good to see you here. Danielle, where are you based? Are you on the West Coast? I've always thought of you on the West Coast, but you always jump on here on my morning broadcasts, and it's 5 o'clock on it, on the West Coast. So, oh, Illinois. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, that makes more sense. Well, I'm glad to have you on. I know a lot more people will catch this on the replay, so those of you who are watching this on the replay, make sure you're following me on all of the different networks here on HAP, but on all of the networks I simulcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Also follow me on Instagram and Parler as well. Now, something I've been thinking a lot about because I've been facing a lot of it, and that is the apostasy within the church war. You see, there's a war, as you guys know, about what is the definition of Christianity. And there is so much heresy within the Christian church, particularly the Western church. And the progressive agenda has taken up root in the church. Every denomination, every Christian tradition, whether it's the Catholic Church, even Orthodoxy to a lesser extent, definitely within Anglicanism, within the mainline Protestant denominations, even in the non-denominational evangelical movement, we've been seeing this massive growth of apostasy in the name of wokeism, in the name of progressivism, in the name of inclusion, and all of these other things. And I know I use the wrong, but we have very well-meaning people who have been deceived or furthering this secular Marxist agenda in some cases. And there's actually, side note, there's actually non-Christians who are funding some of these groups. Soros has put massive funding into dissident Catholic groups and dissident evangelical groups because he wants to undermine traditional Christianity. And so some of these woke pastors that we are seeing are actually funded by Soros. They're being funded by complete secularists who want to undermine our civilization, who want to pit us against each other. And one of the things, it's crazy. You can actually find, this is not conspiracy theory, guys. You can find it online. I mean, type in Soros funded evangelical organization. Type that in, see what you find. I forgot the name of the organization, but some of these organizations that were actually some of these evangelicals for Biden and Catholics for Biden, those are Soros funded, some of them. Not to mention the complete undermining of traditionalism. And here's the thing, progressivism goes against the tenets of Christianity. It's actually a extreme heresy. And I'm not saying that you can't be a Christian and hold on to progressive politics. There's actually some things that we think of as politically progressive that's not necessarily anti-Christian. And in some ways, some of these people are attracted to certain things that the progressives are championing out of their Christian beliefs. Things like climate change, I don't really agree with it, but I think we can all agree that we have to steward God's earth. And so those who want to, jump on the bandwagon and go from more of a progressive environmental standpoint I get that, and that's not necessarily evil. I might disagree with it, but it's not morally wrong. But the actual philosophy of progressivism, that we are progressing as a people and we are becoming more enlightened and we need to move past the old ways because, we now know better than before. That goes against traditional Christianity because traditional Christianity is just that, it's traditional. Progressivism goes against tradition. Well, God ordained tradition. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So one of the heresies that we hear in the liberal church is, well, that was the God of the Old Testament. What do you mean, the God of the Old Testament? God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The God of the Old Testament is the same God as the New Testament. So when it's like, well, he was, a judgmental God, but now blah, 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 blah. Or, well, we have to look at Jesus. That was God the Father, but now he's operating as Jesus. Well, that's a heresy. It goes against the understanding of the Trinity. See, much of progressivism goes against the idea that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's anti-Trinitarian, etc. And so it's actually anti-Christ because there's passages of where it talks about Christ returning as a conquering judge, as a conquering king, as a vengeful judge. Jesus was not some namby-pamby hippie. He wasn't. But the liberals want to make him out to be this namby-pamby hippie. That wasn't Jesus. And it's certainly not the Jesus as he's going to return, as he's promised to return. He came the first time as a sacrificial lamb. He's coming back as the roaring, conquering Lion of Judah. And that's biblical. So we can't come up with this thing, well, we have to be loving and we have to embrace everyone. Well, yeah, that's true, but I'm loving to my daughter. I don't allow her to get away with everything. When she's screaming in the house, and when she was telling me at 8 o'clock last night that she was done with bedtime and that she didn't want to go to sleep, I told her tough. I was nice and kind, and I tried to comfort her and tell her she needed to sleep, but eventually I was just like, hey, you need to just be in here. You don't need to sleep, but you just need to lay here. Tough love is just that, it's love. Licentiousness and letting people get away with everything they want to get away with is not love. Loving parents don't do that, and God doesn't do that, thankfully. And so the idea that Christianity is evolving and that we in this era know things and understand things that the early apostles, the ones who penned scripture, didn't, is a heresy. It's apostasy. So, and I'll use the example, the whole idea of homosexuality. They go, well, Paul didn't understand about orientation. Danielle, thank you so much for the super heart there. Paul didn't understand about sexual orientation. He wasn't talking about loving homosexual relationships. He was talking about promiscuity. Well, that is so twisting scripture. It's twisting 1,900 years of church tradition and church understanding of sexuality. But you see, we're more enlightened. We now understand what 1,900 years of Christianity didn't. That's heresy. There's a war within the church, my friends. That's just one example. Bad doctrine, heresies when it comes to the Trinity, etc. But you see, we're in a war for culture, and there's many Christians who are fighting on the other side of the culture war. Planned Parenthood has a faith council. Yes, there's a whole bunch of pastors, so-called pastors, who pray for Planned Parenthood and advise Planned Parenthood on how to be a good abortion provider, according to their branch of Christianity. There are those Christians who believe it is acceptable to carry out hate crimes against Jews. I have a cousin like that. She believes it is acceptable to desecrate a synagogue if that synagogue was displaying an Israeli flag, which is a symbol of the Jewish people, incidentally. But she believes it's acceptable because, oh my goodness, the poor Palestinians. And so she believes that Israelis, the Jews, are responsible for the torture and murder of little children. It's an anti-Semitic blood libel, much like we heard through the Middle Ages that was used to commit genocide against Jewish people. Now we're hearing it from progressive Christians. And they believe traditionalists like me are hate-filled because we believe that that true sexuality, well, the sexual expression, I shouldn't say sexuality because there is such a thing as a celibate sexuality, but we believe that the sexual expression, as in, the sex act, is supposed to only happen in a heterosexual marriage. One man, one woman. Not polygamy, not polyamory, not homosexuality. One man, one woman. And that makes us hate-filled bigots. For us to stand up against those who want to destroy our country means that we have hate in our hearts. For us to stand up against those who want to destroy the people of God means that we have hate in our hearts. There is a war for our church. There's the culture war that's being fueled by secular Marxism largely, but there is also the church war. If we go back to the French Revolution, yes, it was an antichrist spirit that arose in France. It was secularism. It was not just an overthrow of the monarchy and the aristocracy, which was evil in of itself, blood in the streets, but it was also a complete rebellion against the church. I mean, they turned Notre Dame Cathedral into the Temple of Reason. They put up idols in the churches. They killed priests. Christians had to go underground. They had to worship in secret. That was the French Revolution. In many ways, there is a revolution going on in our era. There is a revolution going on right now. They are trying to overthrow our country. They are trying to overthrow our civilization. And they are trying to overthrow Christ's one holy church. There was a pope, I believe it was a pope, who said, "The smoke of Satan is swirling around the throne of Peter," meaning that Satan had infiltrated Christ's holy church. So what do we do? What do we do, my friends? What do we do? We need to resist. We need to understand what true Christianity is. And we need to stand up against those heretics. So there's a few ways we do that. One, we need to be aware of the apostate churches. I was driving along the street a few weeks ago, and I saw a whole bunch of people waving transgender flags outside of a church. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they're protesting the church. I need to find a place to pull over, and I need to go and defend the church. And then I realized, wait a minute, Matthew, what church is that? Oh, wait a minute. They're not protesting the church. They're probably actually from that church. We have churches that have put the transgender flag and the gay rights flag alongside of the cross. We have churches that have put up icons of Harvey Milk. I kid you not. That hold him up as a saint to be revered, which is kind of ironic because he wasn't even a Christian. But that is what's going on. So what do we do? Well, one, we call that out and we say, you are not Christian. You have departed from the holy faith. That's one thing. We need to recognize and we need to call things out and say, you might call yourself a Christian, but you are not the traditional, you are not a Christian as the church has defined it for 2,000 years. You know, one of the definitions of Christian is to hold on to the creeds. So when you reject the creeds, when you reject the central parts of the gospel, you are no longer a Christian. And that's one thing. We also need to throw the heretics out of our own churches. We need to hold on to doctrine. We need to be properly catechized. We need to be able to call people out when they speak heresy. We need to be able to do that. There were the Huguenots in France. They were Protestant dissidents. They were iconoclasts, meaning they didn't like icons. They were opposed to the use of icons. And they responded to what they saw as idolatry within the Catholic Church. They rose up against the Catholic churches. They smashed icons. They caused trouble. Yeah, I have Huguenot ancestry as well, Danielle. I'm very proud of it, even though I might disagree with their theology. But their zeal and their passion for upholding what they saw as the purity of the Catholic Church, of the Church, of Christ's Church, and to stand up against what they saw as apostasy and idolatry is to be commended. You know, we celebrate Hanukkah and we, play the dreidels and we eat the potato latkes. Some of us celebrate it, but the Jews celebrate it. But what always kind of I laugh about is when the secular Jews celebrate it. Because if you look at Hanukkah, the story of Hanukkah is the Maccabees. Read the stories of the Maccabees. In a nutshell, because I have to go in a minute here, in a couple minutes, the Maccabees rose up against the apostasy and the secularism within the Jewish people. The word Maccabee means hammer. The Maccabean revolt started because they refused to, one of the Maccabees, the patriarch, refused to carry out a pagan sacrifice within the temple. And he struck down a priest who stepped forward to do that. He killed a priest who was willing to desecrate the temple. Now, I'm not suggesting that we start carrying out murders, But we need to have that kind of zeal. They went around and they like did forced circumcisions because there were all of these Hellenized Jews, these Jews who were living as Greeks, who were living secular life. They restored the faith and they overthrew the Greeks and took back their country. We need to have that kind of zeal where we call the people of God back to orthodoxy, back to the true faith. That's what we need to do. And we need to be willing to face the persecution. We need to be willing to run to the hills, spiritually speaking. We need to be willing to go underground if it comes to that. And we need to also come alongside of those holy priests, those holy pastors who are standing firm. We need to be their support. We need to build underground networks so that the true church will survive the persecution which is to come. Because what we're seeing now is nothing. We need to look at what's going on in other countries. We're going to see more church shutdowns. We're going to see greater war because true Christianity will be called a hate religion. And they will try to shut it down. And many of us will have to go underground. And there's going to become more and more of a war. What we've seen within Anglicanism, the great schism here, where the Episcopal Church and Anglicanism split over doctrine, we're going to see that more. We might even see that in the Catholic Church. We might lose our church buildings. We need to be ready for that. We need to be spiritually prepared. That's it, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow me on all the networks: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Parler, YouTube, and here on HAPS. God bless all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and have a great weekend.